When it comes to herbal medicine, how you preserve your herbs can make or break the effectiveness of your remedies. It's not just about keeping them from wilting or molding. It's about protecting the very compounds that give those plants their healing power. Many people ask if they can freeze herbs to keep them fresh. It's a fair question, but also one that reveals a deeper issue. Most folks don't realize that medicinal plants are incredibly sensitive to the way they're handled. Freezing, drying, tincturing, each method has its place. But they are not interchangeable, and using the wrong one can render your herbs nearly useless, or worse, unsafe. So let's talk about the right ways to preserve herbs for long-term use in herbal remedies, and the wrong ways too, with the reasons why. The first thing to understand is that not all plant parts behave the same way after harvest. Delicate leaves, tender flowers, tough roots, woody barks, and oily seeds each have different needs. Just like you wouldn't store lettuce the same way you'd store potatoes, you can't treat lemon balm the same way you'd treat ginger. Preservation isn't one size fits all. For delicate leafy herbs and flowers, plants like lemon balm, mint, tulsi, chamomile, calendula, and red clover, the best preservation method is air drying. When done correctly, this protects the volatile oils and phytochemicals that would otherwise degrade quickly. These herbs should be gathered at their peak, often just after the morning dew has dried, and dried slowly in the shade, somewhere with good air circulation and low humidity. Hanging small bundles upside down or laying them flat on screens allows moisture to escape without overheating or over-drying. This method keeps the herb intact for around 1 to 2 years, depending on storage. After that, while the plant matter might look fine, its potency often begins to fade. It's kind of like those grocery store spices, like garlic powder or dried oregano from big brands. Most people don't realize that by the time those hit the shelf, the herbs inside are already 1 to 3 years old before you even open the bottle. And they've usually been ground, heat processed, and warehoused for months, if not longer. So even though they smell familiar, the medicinal potency is long gone. That's the difference between just flavoring your food and actually working with plants for healing. You can't expect real results from herbs that are already years past their prime. For tougher plant parts, such as roots like dandelion or burdock, barks like willow, and woody herbs like rosemary, air drying isn't always enough. These parts are denser and hold on to moisture longer, which makes them prone to mold if dried too slowly. In these cases, a dehydrator offers a more reliable method. Low and steady heat, ideally between 105 and 125 degrees Fahrenheit, draws out moisture without damaging the medicinal compounds inside. It's crucial not to crank the temperature up in an attempt to speed up the process. Too much heat destroys what you're trying to preserve. Once fully dried and stored properly in a dark, airtight container, these herbs will also last 1 to 2 years. But again, time, light, heat, and air all slowly degrade potency even when stored well. Now, for some herbs, drying just isn't ideal at all. A good example is St. John's wort. Once dried, it loses much of its potency, especially the red pigmented hypericin that makes it so unique. Milky oats are another. Their most medicinal form is when the plant is harvested fresh, in its milky stage, and tinctured right away. This is where alcohol-based preservation comes in. Tincturing is a method of locking in a plant's medicinal properties at the exact moment they're harvested. When you use high-proof alcohol in the correct ratios, it extracts and preserves the plant's active constituents, often for many years, sometimes indefinitely. Tinctures don't degrade the same way dried plant matter does, and they're also highly concentrated and portable. They're especially useful when the herb in question loses its value when dried, or when you want a long-term, shelf-stable medicine that won't require refrigeration or regular rotation. Now let's circle back to freezing, because this is where things often go wrong. Freezing can be appropriate for specific herbs under specific conditions. Roots like ginger, turmeric, and galangal, for instance, freeze well. In fact, freezing these types of roots actually helps break down the cell walls slightly, making them easier to slice and incorporate into topical remedies or decoctions. The trick is to freeze them whole or pre-sliced, wrapped tightly to prevent freezer burn, and to use them within several months for best potency. But freezing delicate herbs, especially fresh leafy greens or flowers, is almost always a mistake. When water inside those tender plant tissues freezes, it expands and forms sharp ice crystals that rupture the cell walls. This leaves you with a soggy, broken-down mess once thawed. The structure of the herb is destroyed, and with it, many of the volatile oils and medicinal compounds. In the worst cases, this can cause oxidation or even encourage bacterial growth if thawed slowly or used improperly. There's also the issue of storage mistakes. A common one is sealing freshly harvested herbs into airtight jars before they've fully dried. That leftover moisture becomes a breeding ground for mold and bacteria, which can not only ruin the batch, but could be harmful if consumed. Another common mistake is storing dried herbs in the kitchen, near the stove or sink, or in the bathroom. Both of these environments are high in heat and humidity, and even brief exposure to moisture can drastically shorten shelf life or lead to spoilage. And then there's the temptation to speed things up with an oven or microwave. But high heat, especially rapid or uneven heat, destroys many of the compounds you're trying to preserve. That includes aromatic oils, alkaloids, flavonoids, and more. You might end up with herbs that look dry, but have little to no medicinal value left. Using improperly stored or preserved herbs doesn't just lead to a weaker remedy, it can also lead to contamination. Moldy herbs, oxidized oils, or partially fermented tinctures are all possible outcomes when the wrong storage method is used. Ingestion or topical use of degraded herbs can irritate the body, trigger allergies, or even cause harm in sensitive individuals. So while aesthetics and taste might suffer first, the risks go deeper than that. For herbalists, especially those preparing home apothecaries for long-term or emergency use, preservation isn't just a technical detail. It's a matter of honoring the plant, protecting your investment, and ensuring that when the time comes to use your medicine, it will actually work. In short, think of your preservation method as part of your remedy, not just a way to keep herbs from going bad. Drying gives you a year or two. Tincturing can last a lifetime. Freezing has its place, but only for the tough, fibrous parts. And shortcuts? They usually cost more than they save. If you wouldn't make medicine from wilted lettuce or moldy spinach, don't do it with your herbs either. Your remedies are only as good as the care you took to preserve them.